thanks. Like, hey, Scoob, did you hear Nikki Blake is hosting a Scooby-Doo panel? No. Yeah. Like on today's Scooby-Doo episode, Scooby-Doo and Shaggy meet Nikki Blake. Yeah, and a Scooby Panel. Like, we need to get this puppy started. Okay, Nikki Blake, take it away, Scooby-Doo.
Welcome to the Scooby Panel. I'm your host, Nikki Blake from ScoobyAddicts.com, and today we're talking about what makes the Scooby Gang iconic. Before we begin, I'll have everyone introduce themselves, and Wendy, will start with you.
Hi guys, I'm Wendy BRYDGE. I'm a commissioned artist, and I've been collecting Scooby for over 30 years.
Joel?
Hey there, I'm Joel from the YouTube channel Planet Scooby.
So we're talking about what makes the Scooby Gang iconic, and the definition of iconic is something that is widely known, highly successful, and serving as a classic symbol or representation of a specific time, place, or idea. Wendy, what is one thing that you feel makes the Scooby Gang iconic?
This was a really interesting thing to think about. And I think that there are a number of things. I will say, I'm not gonna expand on this one little point, but I do want to make it. I mean, I do think that the success of anything, a small, just like a little bit of it, no matter what it is, simply does come down to, like, I'm not gonna say luck, but right place, right time, right people doing the right thing, even if they're not necessarily trying. Sometimes it's that lightning in a bottle thing. So I do think that there's like that much of that is the case with Scooby, but I think a lot more goes into it. So kind of, to me, the most obvious and literal reason that Scooby is so iconic, I think, honestly, is the visual of the gang. And the gang are very visually balanced. And a couple of things go into that. Number one, the colors. It's a very, very colorful look. When you see the gang lined up, it's very, very colorful, but it's not a rainbow, though. There's a difference between the aesthetic of a rainbow and then the aesthetic of the gang. And not just because there's a few like small colors that are not quite, I mean, they're kind of all there, but we're not seeing it represented as a rainbow. So it is giving like a different look, but it's very balanced. You've got a lot of everything. And when you look at how the gang are dressed, even though they may not be exactly complementary colors. So a complementary color, basically, you look at the color wheel, whatever color is opposite the other one, that is its complementary color. So yellow and purple is the standard complementary color. So we don't get that, but we get close to it. So Daphne with her green, Velma the orange, and the red are just like a very similar color, and they go good together. You know, Freddy the orange and the blue. It's a very complementary color palette that they have been given. And, you know, it's kind of like when people talk about food and they say, you know, you eat with your eyes first. Well, it's true. You could have the most delicious plate of food in the world, but if it's just all brown and all one texture, and it's not going to look very appealing, there's a good chance you might not even try it, even though it may be the best tasting thing that has ever been invented. So there is something to be said for the visual of something. And television is a visual medium. You see the gang first. You see those beautiful backgrounds. And so just in the most basic form of Scooby, what do they look like? What are they wearing? You get that really nice balance. We also get balance something in as simple as the heights of everyone that are in the gang. You've got tall and short, and then you've got Scooby, which this was kind of an interesting when I started thinking about it. Scooby is a very large breed of dog. Imagine that, you know, that model sheet pose of the gang lined up. So you're getting like the perfect size comparison. And now imagine Scooby as being a very, very small dog. So a Chihuahua, the breed is irrelevant, but just a very small statured dog, or a dog that is maybe gray or white, and just looking at the colors, which poor Joel might have a more difficult time than we do because Joel's colorblind here, but it wouldn't be, to me anyway, it would not be nearly as visually balanced. The brown of Scooby and the fact that he is like substantial in size enough to create this asymmetrical balance with the gang, it's very visually appealing. So it's hard to look at Scooby, I think, and even if you're not a fan of mysteries, even if you're not a fan of the cartoon per se or the characters, I really think you would be hard pressed to look at it and strictly from a visual perspective, not be drawn to it on some level. So that's a very superficial reason, but I think it's a valid one because visuals matter. They really do. And Scooby is very balanced visually and just very pleasing to the eye.
I agree that the colors definitely make them iconic. I mean, how many times do you look at a color and you're just like, oh, that reminds me of Daphne, or that reminds me of Shaggy, or, you know, and then when you have just like a bar of color, and the colors that represent the gang are, even if it's like 2 or 3 colors together, you're like, oh, that's, you know, that's Fred or that's Velma. And yeah, so it says a lot when you think about the gang or you think about Scooby just based on colors.
Yeah.
I also do like the height difference. Does kind of set things off a little bit.
Yeah.
Joel, any comments on Wendy's color and height?
No, I entirely agree. The color profile, iconic. Don't really have anything to really add because being colorblind and all. The height thing too, yeah, makes sense. The look of it, just like when you said, all the right things coming together at once. Just very well designed.
So what do the gang look like to you, being colorblind?
Oh, I don't know. I don't know purple versus blue. Like, so I guess they kind of look um less colorful, still colorful. Like Velma looks orange. Shaggy's green, brown. Fred's white, orange, ascot, blue jeans. I guess I just don't see the spectrum, the wider spectrum of colors compared to you, but they're still distinct.
Okay. Joel, what is one thing that you feel like makes the gang iconic?
I kind of approach this from a tier level, like I'm going with like a broader tier person where Scooby-Doo's on their radar, but they might not know the gang, but they definitely know Scooby-Doo. And an example would be my dad. He wouldn't know the gang. He never sat down and watched Scooby-Doo, but he definitely knew what Scooby-Doo was. And it wasn't because I watched cartoons with him or like Scooby-Doo was basically around before I was born. My brothers watched it, but my dad never sat down and watched cartoons. He wasn't a mega cartoon guy, but I think why he knew Scooby-Doo, he loved dogs, but he wouldn't know every cartoon dog out there. But I think maybe the name Scooby-Doo just has staying power. Like he wouldn't know who Marmaduke, Scooby-Doo, both Great Danes. He would have no idea what Marmaduke was. Even though he read the paper, I don't think he read the funnies though. But Scooby-Doo he knew. And I think, yeah, it's a name. It's kind of like he knew who Fred Flintstone was. Yeah, that kind of alliteration. You knew Bugs Bunny, but that's probably more his time. Daffy Duck, Mickey Mouse, just those. Like I was a Star Wars kid. I was Star Wars crazy, but he had no idea what Darth Vader was. Like, what's a Darth Vader? What's an ET? What's a He-Man? What's a G.I. Joe? What's a Transformer? He had no idea. What's a Smurf? No idea. he always knew Scooby-Doo, even in his senior years. He knew Scooby-Doo. He knew I was a Scooby-Doo fanatic too, because I was always wearing Scooby-Doo shirts, but I could have worn a Darth Vader shirt, Princess Leia. He wouldn't know what the heck that was, even though I was crazy for Star Wars, like in the late 70s, 80s. It was huge. Yeah, I just think the name, the concept of the name, maybe you heard the theme song. Like, I remember my brother, when he had kids, he knew who Barney was because of the theme song. Maybe Scooby-Doo kind of, he maybe didn't watch the cartoons, but when he was like in the other room, you could hear the Scooby-Doo theme song. He loved Abbott and Costello, Lauren Hardy. And Abbott and Costello, Scooby-Doo was kind of based on Abbott and Costello, like the people who wrote Scooby-Doo were looking back at that comedy horror aspect, and it definitely influenced Scooby-Doo. So yeah, I'm just broader tier. I just think the name, just the alliteration of it, the simplicity of it, just tying it with that cute dog, it just makes it stick, makes it iconic.
Yeah, I definitely think Scooby's name is iconic, even if no one else knew anyone but Scooby. And it's kind of interesting to think about it in that perspective when you're also mentioning other cartoon character names, because you don't really think about them being on the same tier, but then name-wise, when you're thinking of it that way, yes, they would probably all be just as iconic.
Mhm.
Wendy, what are your thoughts on the name being iconic?
Yeah, I agree. And then also the rest of the gang's names, like they're quite unusual, but they're not weird. And I think that that also gives something staying power because they're very, I don't know what the word is. They're very distinct, but again, it's not like some strange name that, you know, some celebrity in 2026 would name their kid, where you're just like that's an object. Why are you naming your kid Blanket? What's wrong with you? So they're not like that, but they are very unique. And I think that that also can lend itself to remembering something or being interested in it. And we don't really come across a lot of people named Velma or Daphne. Fred is, of course, much more prominent, but even that I would say is a more like a more vintage name. I don't know that I don't know that I have ever known a Fred, like in my actual, like in real life. I don't know that I've ever met a man named Fred. So everyone's name is unique as well, you know, not just Scooby, but the rest of the gang too. And yeah, that definitely, like, how do you forget about that? It's just so unusual, but pleasantly so.
It is kind of funny that you bring that up because, like, my brain always thinks of the names that they could have chosen for the gang. And, you know, I think of really old names like Myrtle,
Mm-hmm.
Dorothy,
Yeah.
you know, Bert. I don't know. It would have changed a lot if
Yeah.
they had names like that. I just don't feel like they would have been timeless.
Mm-hmm.
I do agree that the names that they chose make them timeless because they can be used kind of in any generation. You know, they're not so dated that they seem like old names. Even with Fred being kind of a vintage name, it's not an outdated name.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah. Wendy, what is another thing that you feel makes the gang iconic?
This is kind of a boring answer, but I think there's some validity in it. Scooby has really never been off the air. And as far as I understand it, like they were playing reruns of season 1 and 2 of Where Are You even before the show went into syndication. So it was just kind of always there. And I feel like even if you are not necessarily a fan of something or you don't necessarily watch something, you know, as I'm getting older, when I look back at my childhood, my memories of commercials are sometimes stronger than my memories of the shows that I was actually sitting down to watch, which is odd because I don't watch ads at all anymore. But So I could imagine back when there was way less of a selection, there weren't hundreds of channels, there wasn't internet, there wasn't streaming or on demand. I can imagine that a lot of people were at least exposed to Scooby, even if it was just by name or commercial only, or you're flipping around, and it pops on because they're playing reruns of it. Even if you didn't stop to watch it, I feel like it would be hard to ignore it completely. So I think that helped it become just part of pop culture, I guess. Helped Scooby become like an everyday name. Again, pairing what we've already said, it's such an unusual name, but it's got something to it that, you remember it. As soon as you hear it, it clicks in your mind. So I think just the fact that in the beginning, it never went off. And I think that also lends itself to why it was able to keep evolving and reinventing itself just before the Scrappy seasons started. It was close to being cut, but it had always been there. It had been there for years and years. And I think that is part of how, Joe Barbera got away with like, okay, well, let's give it a new character and let's keep it going. And as it has progressed over the years, it just like, it's built on itself. And I think part of its popularity is just the fact that it's been there. How do we do without it? Why would we want to do without it? And so that makes it iconic. It kind of made itself iconic by just always being present. And now, yes, somebody could argue that plenty of shows have been played in reruns. You can still watch pretty much every Hanna-Barbera cartoon that they made, but it's all these other things that we're talking about, I think, that help make Scooby a little bit more special than some of the other things that are still good, but they weren't that lightning in a bottle. They're not iconic the way that Scooby is, but I do think him just like, I don't know. Has he ever been off the air? Like no reruns, no syndication, no nothing? I don't think he has.
Yeah, I'm not sure. Maybe between Pup and Zombie Island at some point, because
I was watching them in reruns then.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know.
I don't know.
I don't know. Yeah, that does kind of tie into one of the reasons that I find them to be iconic, and that's because people are so familiar with them because it was part of their childhood. And people love things that tie into their childhood that bring back happy memories, sitting on the couch, eating cereal, watching Scooby-Doo. And so I think that is it kind of ties in with it being continuous, because not only are people watching reruns, but there's so many different series and so many different movies that pretty much anyone can say, oh, he was a big part of my childhood. And it may not be the same series or the same movies that we grew up with, but, somebody could have been born around the time that What's New was airing, and that was their first introduction to Scooby. And we hear a lot from people that is why they love Scooby so much, because that's what they grew up on. And yeah, so I feel like the nostalgia of it being part of their childhood makes it iconic. Joel, your thoughts on the continuous airtime and them being part of people's childhood?
Yeah, just to expand on that with some other thoughts. We got the clones shortly after Scooby-Doo, and then I think sometimes people in their head, they might like Dynamite. They might think of a Dynamite episode and think it's a Scooby-Doo episode. So there's some crossover there. And then Captain Caveman and all this, like, they're the clones. They weren't as successful, but I think they helped elevate Scooby-Doo, because Scooby-Doo was, I'd say, better quality. for me. And well, time has shown, yeah, Scooby-Doo's kind of stayed iconic. Captain Caveman, not so iconic. All the other ones, Josie and the Pussycats, love them, Archie, but I wouldn't say they're as iconic. And all the other clones, like we wouldn't even know they existed if the DVDs weren't out for those other clone cartoons or the internet, right? They probably would have completely vanished, other than our memories. But then later on, like in the 90s, maybe before Zombie Island or shortly after, we start to see Scooby-Doo kind of influence other things where they'd pay homage to it, or you could tell that was a Scooby-Doo reference. An early example for me was Family Guy. First season, they did like a Scooby-Doo parody, like Family Guy's always jumping around. And because I hadn't seen Scooby-Doo in the media as often, that parody would just kind of blew my mind. And then I thought it was awesome. And then you saw it like with the Robot Chicken and a bunch of other things too. Cartoon Network really extrapolated that idea, and they had, was it in Harvey Birdman, they had Scooby-Doo and other bumpers and stuff. But in the 90s too is also like if you'd read movie reviews, it'd be like this plot's like really Scooby-Doo-ish, which meant childish, but that couldn't be any further from the truth, I think. Scooby-Doo being childish. But it was a phrase I heard a lot in the 90s that irritated me. But I think, yeah, that kind of just Scooby-Doo influenced things really early on with the clones, and then Scooby-Doo just kind of cut through all that, lasted for a while, and then Scooby-Doo maybe had a dip after Pup where there's nothing new being out, but then other shows, yeah, just kind of paid homage to it. We probably saw Simpsons kind of take cues from it, maybe with Treehouse of Horrors. Maybe they kind of, the Scooby-Doo was like a horror kind of show in some sense, mystery. They maybe might have taken cues from that, going, oh, kids really do like spooky stuff, so every year we'll do a spooky Halloween thing. Maybe not. Maybe it was other things that influenced that, but I'm sure the writers of The Simpsons love Scooby-Doo, and in some way, Scooby-Doo worked itself into that. Maybe, I don't know. I'm gonna shut up.
It is true that a lot of other shows, I mean, shows that you wouldn't even expect to see something Scooby-Doo in, have had some type of Scooby-Doo reference. And it's cool to see, that everyone kind of loves Scooby-Doo. And I don't agree with, I guess in the 90s, if they were saying, oh, it's kind of like Scooby-Doo, yeah, they may have been saying it's childish. But now I feel like when people say it's sort of like Scooby-Doo, to them, that's a good thing, because again, it's something that they grew up on or something that they really love, that they kind of wanted to put some elements into whatever they created, which that's definitely a good thing. One of the things that I think makes the gang iconic is the painted backgrounds, the dark colors that they use, the dark tones. It kind of creates an unforgettable atmosphere. You can watch a Scooby episode and you may not remember the names of the characters and you may not remember the name of the villain, but you're going to remember the scene. You're going to remember the atmosphere. People remember Funland. So I feel like that makes it very iconic because you can remember those details. Some people can even, if you look at just a background, they're like, oh, that's Scooby-Doo. There's no doubt. That's definitely Scooby-Doo. And, that's pretty impressive. So thoughts on the atmosphere, I guess. Wendy?
It's definitely, I mean, again, the visual appeal, it can't be exaggerated, like how important that is. And with the atmosphere of Scooby and the background art in particular, it was very much, at least for me, it really like spurred your imagination being a little kid watching that, because it was so immersive. I think when you have a show an animated show, and it's very non-detailed. It's very loose. The backgrounds are very like nondescript. It doesn't really leave a lot of, I mean, I guess it leaves you open to like use your imagination, but it's also not giving you anything to feed off of. Whereas with something like Scooby, where it's very elaborate, and just the atmosphere of the episodes created by this amazing score, like this music that is so well tailored to where you can be in the other room and you hear a Scooby music cue and you know what's going to happen based just solely on the cue. These are all things that, especially for like young developing minds, it just sparks that imagination. It makes you want to be in it. It makes you think of what's going to happen next. What's over there? I can't tell you the number of times where in a Scooby-Doo background, I have looked at it and thought like, well, but what's over behind those gravestones? What's behind the mausoleum? What is around the corner in Funland? And I want to know. I want to know. And that is a testament to the artists that painted it so beautifully and scored it so beautifully. And it just makes it just sets your mind like it's on fire. And that alone is enough, I think, to give something the status of iconic. The music is iconic, the visual is iconic, and just the way that it makes you feel. You know, there's a saying in speaking of people, that, you know, what people will remember about you is how you made them feel. I think we can apply that to things like programs and cartoons and shows and movies as well. How did that make you feel when you were watching it? And how many times have we talked about that Scooby feels like a safe place? Well, all of these things are what make it feel like that. If it looked different, if the backgrounds were not the way they are, if the music was not how it was, it would not be creating that same feeling in the viewer. So absolutely, like I can't remember what the panel was, but one time I was like, imagine a Scooby episode, but it's just them doing all of the things on a white background. There's no background. It would not be the same. It just wouldn't be. So like all of those elements fit together to make the whole. And again, we're back to the idea of balance. And Scooby is very well balanced because each of these aspects has been put together very, very well. And I would not want to watch Scooby without the backgrounds or the music. It just wouldn't, you know, I can think of some shows where you could get away with that and it really wouldn't be much different than what you're watching. And it's I'm not saying that those things are not enjoyable. You know, there's plenty of shows that are not that detailed and well thought out that they're still enjoyable to watch, but they're forgettable. And they don't make you feel anything special. Scooby makes you feel special, and Scooby makes you want to solve the mystery with them. And that's pretty special.
And when other shows use the same musical cues, it really messes with my brain. Because I'm just like, wait, where's Scooby? Where's Shaggy? Are they going to show up soon? Like, no, they're not. Not the show, but Joel, your thoughts on the atmosphere?
Yeah, that Josie and the Pussycats season 1, they used Scooby cues and it drove me nuts. Made it really difficult to watch. And then you have the similar voice actors too, like Casey Kasem and so yeah. The atmosphere, yeah, it's really immersive because it's like a movie, like a good movie gets you with the score, the acting, the framing of things. And I'd say framing is part of the backgrounds, like there's different viewpoints that really draw you in, and you feel like you, even though you don't know what's around the corner, you feel like you are there and you could hopefully grab a look, like using your imagination. And I think too, the backgrounds, because Scooby-Doo mostly takes place at night, they're a little bit darker, so the the characters kind of really pop out too. They stand out, and the backgrounds, while detailed, they're also not like mega detailed. Like they just show enough. Where I think modern cartoons are super detailed, but you don't there's just too much on the screen. Where Scooby-Doo, I think the trick was they knew enough to leave things out. So your imagination kind of filled things in. And I think Flintstones kind of did that too. Like they had a sparse room, but they always had like that dinosaur technology going on, like the record player or something, the TV. But you know, because those are really memorable backgrounds too for the Flintstones, and that compared to Scooby-Doo. They're just like matte paintings that they used in Hollywood too, like just these beautiful backgrounds that they'd only show up for like 2 or 3 seconds, but yeah, they're gorgeous. And you think too, like what a waste. That person probably worked like 8 hours for 3 seconds, less than 3 seconds, probably a second of time. And a lot of it got thrown away. And it's just like, oh man, it all should be in a museum.
It should be.
Scooby Museum.
Joel, do you have another reason that you think makes the Scooby Gang iconic?
I think for me, it was like the show never treated like, especially season 1, just never treated like you're an idiot. They never talk down to you. They never over explain things. The mystery, there's some plot holes, but you can only do so much in 20 minutes. I don't care. It's a 20-minute show. You can't put a Murder, She Wrote plot into this thing. And it's generally meant for kids, but I think it was meant more for an older demographic of kids, not the younger one, but the younger ones kind of caught on to it because kids don't want to be treated like they're dumb. They want to be treated like they're smart because kids are generally bright. And, like I don't want to slam other cartoons, but cartoons got pretty dumb in the 80s compared to like the 70s. I like those 80s cartoons a lot, but they're just not as nourishing. And I can ramble off a bunch of them. I won't because I don't want to insult the creators, but they were great, but they didn't stand the test of time because they were just they were more marketing materials, either selling product or selling commercials, where Scooby-Doo, every TV show is selling commercials, right? But Scooby-Doo stood the test of time because it was a smart show. It was very clever.
My 2-year-old great nephew is loving Scooby-Doo right now. My sister sent me a video the other day and he's just sitting on the couch and he's engrossed in Scooby-Doo. I'm like, yes, another Scooby fan. But yeah, it is nice that they don't dumb it down, but it's also a show that you can watch with a young kid and it's not going to scare them because they make it spooky, but still a little comedic to keep it from being too scary. And I think it's a great way to introduce kids to something like that because you can explain everything to them. It's not super scary, but it also has, a little bit of like spookiness that, oh, you can maybe make them not be as afraid. Wendy, your thoughts on them not downplaying it?
Yes, they knew their audience and they played for the audience. And that is so important. And their audience was everyone. It was definitely, like we talk about Scooby being, for kids, but like Joel pointed out, I do think that a big part of the demographic was like a little bit older than that. But the great thing about Scooby, because they didn't dumb it down, because they made it appropriate for whatever age, there was enough simplicity in it that younger kids could enjoy it, but there was enough detail and immersiveness that older kids, as well as adults, could also sit and watch it and not feel like, oh my God, like Baby Shark. You know what I mean? I couldn't do that just as an adult. If you have a kid, that's one thing, but for the whole audience to be able to get something out of a show that's a really big deal. That makes something iconic when you can do that. And I definitely think that Scooby hit that mark. Any age. I mean, you could sit down with your grandma and watch Scooby-Doo and not worry about there being something in it that she's not particularly going to like, or that's going to offend her, or that she's not going to understand. You can have, you know, a 3-year-old, a 4-year-old sit down and watch it, and you don't have to worry about what they're seeing or what might be said to them. And it's just enjoyable for everyone. And that is not something that you find very often, in my opinion. It's a rare thing. And I think that that lends itself to Scooby being around for so long, because it doesn't exclude anyone. Everyone can watch it. Everyone can enjoy it. Everyone can get something out of it. And I mean, I don't understand why more shows and more cartoons are not geared that way. You know, like, why would you not do that? Why would you want to alienate your own creation, your own product from certain audiences? In my opinion, they were super talented then, and they cared about what they were doing. How many people have we talked to? And like, they genuinely, like, yes, there's always people who are like, it was just my job, I needed a paycheck. But so many of the people that we have talked to that worked on Scooby are not like that. They were like, no, I loved this. I liked the property. You know, the ones that came later, I watched that when I was a kid, and I wanted to get into it. All of that matters. It all matters. And that is one of the things I think that makes Scooby the most special, is it really is for everyone. And I think that's why I dislike the more modern stuff, because it's trying too hard to be for a certain group of people, whatever that group may be. It's irrelevant what the group is, but they take it away from that like broader appeal, in my opinion, because I'm only 40 and I don't particularly enjoy the atmosphere or the stories of the newer iterations. It's much more dumbed down. The characters have been dumbed down. It doesn't appeal to me anymore. It wouldn't appeal to my dad. My grandma would be like, I don't understand. So, you know, you gotta stick with what works. And thankfully for the modern people working on things, like, you're lucky that Scooby was as iconic as it was. Otherwise, you would not have the privilege to monkey around with it and try and change the formula now. Because those types of formula changes on a show that is not iconic, it's dead. It's dead. Forget it. You're never going to see it again. It's gone into the halls of like VHS world. Like, you're not going to see it again. But with Scooby, no, they did it right. They knew their audience, and they wanted everyone to be able to watch it. And they did a great job.
I am surprised that more shows aren't made for everyone, because as a parent, I watched shows with my kids, and there were a lot of shows that I had such a hard time watching because they were so annoying.
Mm-hmm.
But Scooby-Doo was one that we could watch anytime, and Phineas and Ferb was another one that we would watch. That was a fun show. But there were so many shows that I was just like, why do you like this show? This show is really obnoxious.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Wendy, any other reasons that you find the gang iconic?
It kind of will play off of what we were just talking about a little bit. And we have definitely spoken about this on the panel many, many times. It is the fact that the gang are so relatable and generic. They are unique, but they are generic. Anyone can relate to Velma. You don't need to wear glasses and be nerdy to relate to Velma. You don't need to be, the opposite of that to relate to Daphne. You don't need to be anything but who and what you are to relate to probably on some level every single member of the Scooby Gang. And I really think that that was by design. Again, they knew their audience, and their audience was everyone. And they wanted everyone to be able to enjoy it and get something out of it. So by keeping them, I mean, they're all different, but they're all the same. I think that was a very important lesson too for kids and adults to learn, which is like, you can be unique. I mean, I'm not you, you are not me, but I'm not better than you. We can do the same things. We can like the same things. And that's good. That's normal. That's okay. And so I never felt in classic Scooby that they were competing with each other, or that I never got the sense, you know, we talk about Freddy being like the unofficial leader of the gang, and yet Freddy never bossed them around. And to me, I never even got like a hint of that, like, I don't know, arrogance or whatever someone might have if they were in that leadership role with a bunch of their friends. None of them did that. And each one, if you watch enough Scooby, you will see that every single member of the gang, almost including Scooby too, at one time or another, completed the same task or showed aptitude in the same thing. They could all do all of the things. And I think that that is a great lesson in human nature for the people watching. And that's, I don't know, I feel like that is also something that is very, very rare in shows where you can relate to any of the characters on some level and you don't feel ostracized by any of them, because it goes beyond what somebody looks like. Scooby was about so much more than that. It was about those people and what they were like inside. And I feel like that is often what people, I mean, that's what we should be relating to. Who cares what somebody looks like? Relate to their character inside. That is so much more important. And we get that with Scooby. If you have overly specific characters, it's harder to imagine things. It's harder to write your own narrative. It's why most people, maybe not most people, it's why the people who prefer books over movies prefer the book, because they want to have some creative control in their mind. Like the author has described the character, but now I'm going to visualize the character based on what the author has provided. And that it makes me feel like I'm part of the story. It makes me feel more creative. It gets my imagination going. Scooby allows for that because they have not put anyone in a box. No one is in a box. If anything, they're all in one big box together called the Mystery Machine, and it's just a means of transportation. It does not define any of them in any way, shape, or form, except they're all pretty groovy. So, relatable and generic Scooby. Who would think that those two terms could, especially the generic part, would lead to being iconic? Because I think when you say the word iconic, people are automatically thinking of something like, wow, pizzazz, something crazy. But that's not really true, because there's no staying power to that. Scooby has staying power because no one will ever not be able to relate to those people. That makes him timeless. As long as people can watch it and relate to the characters and what they're doing, that show is going to continue on. And we've seen that with Scooby. Scooby is getting dangerously close to 60 years. 6 decades. That's a really long time to be around. But there's no reason for him not to be. Everyone can still relate.
Joel, your thoughts on their relatability?
Yeah, I agree. I think too, playing off that idea, it's kind of a gender neutral show too. So it appeals to a broader spectrum of people. And You kind of had that a lot around that time too, like Josie and the Pussycats, gender neutral, even though it's called that, you got the guys in there. Flintstones, same deal, but that was aired prime time. But later on, things kind of, there's outliers, but later on, things kind of diverged where you had masculine shows, feminine shows. Example, He-Man, masculine show, and they had She-Ra, the female version, and G.I. Joe, masculine, Transformers, more masculine. They were more to sell toys, like merchandising was at its core because they realized they could do this. But it was a drag when I go to like my cousin's house or a friend's house for a sleepover and like they had a sister and they, you'd want to watch G.I. Joe and the sister would throw a tantrum because she wants to watch Strawberry Shortcake or My Little Pony or Punky Brewster. And you'd be like, oh. But we could all sit down at least and watch Scooby-Doo together because it's a gender neutral show. And girls liked Scooby-Doo, guys like Scooby-Doo, which I think gave it some lasting power. Because later on, everyone who watched that as a kid generally became a parent and they knew they could trust that name. They knew they could have their kids watch that. They'd buy the DVDs, like any mother or father would buy that for their kid. And when you just, I think the masculinity thing has fallen out of, it just doesn't exist anymore. Like girls do like guy things now that were considered guy things back then. Like a lot of girls love He-Man. The He-Man movie came out and made it big bucks, and that's because guys and girls went and saw it. But in the 80s, it just was generally, there's outliers too. There's, as we know, there's a lot of guys who like My Little Pony. But in the 80s, most of the guys in your class did not watch My Little Pony. They would watch Scooby-Doo, they would watch G.I. Joe, but the girls would not watch G.I. Joe and whatnot. And I think I've over-explained my point, so I'll just end it there.
I watched G.I. Joe and Transformers. I preferred those over the girl stuff. I played with G.I. Joes, and my mom and dad would buy me Barbies, and I would have the G.I. Joes or He-Man, like rip the Barbies apart. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh.
Anyway, my next point. I think that keeping them generic and it keeps them relatable because the more you learn about them, like the more you learn about a person, like me telling you that I used to rip Barbies apart, you may not always like stuff that you're learning about somebody, and that can change your opinion of that person. So I feel like later iterations of Scooby, like Mystery Inc., where we're learning about their parents and, their siblings, and we're learning more about who they are as people, I feel like that makes them less relatable. Because can you relate to like being somewhere and you call your parents and they're not answering their phone, like they don't care, or they're like, oh, you're in trouble, call someone else because I'm busy. Stuff like that, and Fred just kind of losing it, and it gives them more personality, which in a way is good, but in other ways it also kind of takes that relatability away from them. So I think earlier generations of Scooby-Doo, because they do stay generic, it's only about the mystery. There is no drama. There is no, the drama is the mystery. But there's nothing else that is getting in the way of them solving the mystery. Typically they're not fighting with each other. They're working together. Even if they're splitting up, they still have the same mission. They're still working towards the same goal. And I think that is what keeps them relatable. Joel, do you have any other things that you feel make the gang iconic?
Yeah, I think the villains make the gang iconic. I don't know if that's going to surprise anyone looking at my backdrop, but good villains like Peter Pan is nothing without Captain Hook, right? Like, and these villains too, I would say were generally inspired by the Universal monsters. Generally, there's room for debate there, of course, but generally a lot of werewolves, A lot of vampires, a lot of Frankenstein monsters, mummies. First season, at least, right? They got wilder as it went on. But that first season, generally 30s Universal monster, which has classic appeal. So you already kind of knew what a Frankenstein monster was. You didn't have to explain Frankenstein's monster or whatever. Kids knew what a vampire was. Kids knew what a werewolf was. Kids knew what a ghost was. But I think because it wasn't trying to sell like a toy monster in the way you got like He-Man selling a villain, G.I. Joe selling the villains as toys. You had that monster of the week appeal where you didn't have to know the villain going in, and you're just kind of surprised what they're gonna surprise you with. Like there's enough variety in the villains. Like when you first time sat down to watch Foul Play and Funland, you didn't know it was going to be a robot, right? No clue. You didn't know that you'd have the Ghost Clan coming in. You didn't know you'd have Space Kook, which is probably more 50s inspired. And I think just how they kind of played with your expectations a bit, but surprised you every week was great. And every villain is memorable in that first season, especially. And there was no alternative motive to sell you a toy or sell you merchandise. It was just to create a spooky episode that would thrill you, that would excite you, that would, spook you out a bit. And it's just the quality of the villain. And yeah, they've kind of recycled some, but they've also, I don't know, what's the word, innovated too with the villains. Because I read somewhere every villain boils down to Frankenstein or Dracula. You got someone who's charming. Again, there's outliers too. Someone who's charming, moves fast, the vampire. Someone who's like slow moving and always coming at you, strong. So you got Frankenstein, mummy, werewolf somewhere in between, I guess, because it's not charming particular as a wolf because it wants to rip your throat out and it's fast. But maybe as a human they're charming. But yeah, every kind of monster apparently is an innovation between those two. But I don't know. That's can be debated and argued to infinity because whatever. We see that modern, like Freddy Krueger's a take on Dracula, or Jason's a take on Frankenstein. Like Freddy Krueger's charming and moves fast, and Jason's, yeah. That's the point I'm trying to make, not some person to get on the keyboard and go, you're wrong. It's just boiling down to basics here.
What are your thoughts on the villains making Scooby-Doo iconic?
I would definitely agree. And honestly, your Peter Pan analogy kind of sold that for me. What would that, like, what would even that, you wouldn't even have a story if it weren't for Captain Hook. It would just be a bunch of kids running away for what? To where? Who cares? The villains, especially if you, because I mean, like we have talked before, there's quite a few Scooby clones and lots of shows with villains in them. Scooby's villains are very creative. Whether it is a very basic Dracula and Frankenstein, like we get in Where Are You? Or whether it is, in the Scooby-Doo show or even the Scrappy shorts, where the villains are more like elaborate or more weird. They're just so creative. And even if you don't like the villain, I feel like it's really hard not, for the most part, to be like, wow, like someone really had to sit down and think about this. Like the Star Creature always comes to mind. The obvious like David Bowie Kiss mashup of the Diabolical Disc Demon. It's just so much fun. Tell me that that's not an iconic look for a villain. They're amazing. You can't forget about them. They are unforgettable. Even if you can't remember the name of the villain, if you're just like a casual fan or watcher, if you see a picture of a Scooby villain, I feel like probably 99% of people will at least be able to tell you that that is a villain from Scooby-Doo. Maybe they can't tell you what episode, maybe they can't tell you its name, but they will recognize it as a Scooby villain. And again, that's a pretty big deal. That your bad guys are so well thought out and well designed and just so creative that they are instantly recognizable as where they came from. Most shows can't say that. I don't think that they can. So yeah, again, kudos to the artists where would Scooby be without the artists? The stories are great, but again, it all boils down to the visuals, I think, being the most important. And all of these things are aspects of the visual appeal of Scooby. But yeah, it just goes to show you like what quality Scooby is, that in every aspect of that show, the quality can be found, even in the villains. And yeah, absolutely. They scream iconic. All of them. Almost every Scooby villain from season 1, anyway, I would say is like a very iconic villain.
Yeah, I have the villains on my list too. And the villains themselves are iconic. Like you said, Wendy, more season 1 villains. You know, there are some from 2 or the Scooby-Doo show. I'm not sure how iconic later villains are, but definitely the earlier ones. I mean, so many people know who they are. People recreate them as stickers and drawings. They try to create figures. So the villains themselves are definitely iconic. And yeah, it makes the show so much more interesting. I mean, imagine what Scooby-Doo would be like if there were no villains. How are they solving the mystery? And it also leads to one of my other things that I feel like is iconic is the formula of the show. So they happen upon some crazy thing that's happening and they search for clues and they solve the mystery and they unmask the villain. That whole formula is just very iconic. In earlier series, they stuck to that formula for the most part. And, you can always count on watching a Scooby episode and maybe you can't guess who it is because I couldn't always figure it out, but you knew what you were getting yourself into and it felt familiar. And, you felt like you could be part of something along with the gang. So, yeah. Your thoughts on it, on the formula making it iconic. Joel?
Yeah, definitely 100% formula. We all like comfort. We want to be surprised, but we also want to know the rules, right? And the formula is kind of the rules. Like we expect that to go on. If they break the rules, then we might fall off that show. And, viewership did kind of fall off for some people when they kind of broke the rules of Scooby-Doo, when we kind of lost that formula. People do love that iteration, but a classic formula where there's the mystery and there's the reveal. Like that's just the best.
Wendy, your thoughts on the formula being iconic?
It's very satisfying because, like Joel said, you do need rules. People say that they don't like rules and stuff, but people don't understand rules sometimes and what that entails. And when you sit down to watch something for entertainment purposes, I feel like you want to be satisfied when you get to the end of it. You want to feel good when you get to the end of it. I am so tired of modern shows and movies where you get to the end of it and it feels like someone just kicked your dog in front of you. That is not entertaining to me. That is not to say that stories that follow that type of formula are not well written or interesting or creative. They are, but they are not serving the same purpose as what I personally would like entertainment to serve me. I want to be satisfied at the end. And I don't know that there is anything more satisfying than classic Scooby. You know what to expect. You are going to be surprised. You don't know that it's going to be a different villain every time. It's going to be a different story every time. But there is like dependability there. You know that at the end of that episode, you are going to find out who the bad guy is. They're going to stop the bad guy. And everyone's going to go home and be happy and friends. And they're probably going to go have a hamburger at the malt shop. It is very comforting. And there's nothing wrong with that. That is literally the definition of entertainment. It is supposed to make you feel that way. And also the fact that you can sit down and watch any episode you want, whenever you want, and you need no prior knowledge of the show to understand it. You do not have to search up 5 more episodes to figure out what was going on in the one that you happen to choose to watch. That is also something that is kind of getting more lost today in modern times in entertainment. Even today's procedurals are still, they've got like a very heavy lean into that overarching story. So, because like I really like NCIS, I like those types of procedurals. And yes, you still can sit down and watch any episode that you want, but there is more of an emphasis now on like the behind the story scene drama, that if you do not watch it regularly, you are going to miss something, and someone's going to say something in an episode and you're going to be like, what are they talking about? Are those shows iconic too? Sure they are, but I think Scooby is mostly iconic because he's not like that. Any episode you want. Huge rewatchability factor here with Scooby-Doo, especially classic Scooby. How many times have we watched the giggling green ghost spying Scooby while he's trying to take a bath? Hundreds of times. And you know what? We're going to do it hundreds more. And every time it's going to be great. It never gets old. It is always enjoyable. You are expecting it. We know what is going to happen. You could blindfold us and like play the musical cue for the episode minus the dialogue, and we could recreate the episode. That is how many times we have seen it. And yet, you know what? When that freaking clock opens up and those creepy ghosts come out, I get scared every time. I know it's coming. I know exactly what's going on. Doesn't matter. Every time is almost like the first time on some level. And again, that is like such a special quality for something to have. And as soon as you can make something highly rewatchable, I feel like it's almost hard for it not to become iconic. Because again, in the same way that the gang are endlessly relatable, when you can rewatch an episode over and over and over and over, and you don't really need to you don't have to watch any other episodes if you don't want to. Whether people today want to admit it or not, I think most people are very, very attracted to that. And why shouldn't they be?
Yeah. How many more reasons do you guys have?
I have just one.
Joel, how many?
Not many.
Not many. Okay. Well, Wendy, it's your turn anyway, so.
Okay.
Wendy, what is your next reason for why the gang is iconic?
Okay, this one is going to dovetail nicely with what we were just talking about. And I feel like a lot of people today will disagree with this. I don't care, because you're wrong. And in this instance, I'm right. Scooby came from a time where entertainment was pretty much primarily built on good versus evil, and good always wins. That is becoming a lost art in entertainment in our day and age. And I think again, to sort of play on what we were just saying about, you know, there being rules and there being like an expectation of like, you kind of know what's going to happen. We've said this before. Entertainment should be an escape from reality. I don't want to sit down to escape from my crappy reality of like whatever bad things are going on to just be shown more bad things, because that is not going to make me feel good. It's not entertaining. And if I am going to feel worse than when I sat down, why am I doing it? I don't think that that's good. So I honestly think that the primary reason that Scooby is so iconic is that those early iterations of him were so wholesome and were completely based on a relatable form of good versus evil, and good always wins. We see a lot of good versus evil in like fantasy monster movies, that kind of thing, where it's more like, that's a classic way of looking at good versus evil. Or you watch a Western, you know, and there's the guy in the black hat and he's the bad guy, and then there's the good guy and they have a, you know, they have a fight at the end, and when the bad guy gets shot and the good guy wins. That, I feel like that is a fundamental human desire for good to triumph over evil. And when it comes to the Scooby Gang, yeah, we're talking like evil small e here. You've got bad guys that are stealing from people. You've got bad guys that are, you know, doing any number of, let's say, more small potatoes. You know, although one could argue the number of times that these villains have like legitimately tried to murder the gang is disturbing. So it is a little more serious too. But as a kid, that I feel like that doesn't really register with us, that how much danger they are actually being put in by these people. But Scooby shows us a very real world example of how every individual can fight evil on their own terms. You don't see that anywhere today. I don't think that that exists today in modern entertainment. If you see it, it's because you're watching an old episode of Scooby or some old episode, you know, from the 50s or the 60s or the 70s. And I think that that kind of programming helps make people better people, especially when you can work that into a show that is being watched by kids and young adults, because it shows them, you know, don't give up. There may be challenges in your life. There may be situations and circumstances and people that, you know, are going to make your life harder. Don't give up. Persevere. Be optimistic. Because in the end, good needs to triumph over evil, and good will triumph over evil, and Scooby proves it every single episode. Today, I feel like we have forgotten that fundamental lesson about life, and everything is just dark and pessimistic and nihilistic. And they wonder why everyone is so depressed. Well, we're so depressed because you're just showing us depressing things, and you've taken away all of the hope. Scooby is like a beacon of hope, because you know that no matter what those bad guys throw at the Scooby Gang, they are going to stick together. They're going to go through it. Maybe Daphne's going to get kidnapped and they need to go find her. Maybe Velma's going to get strapped to a log and Scooby's going to have to save her. It does not matter. They are going to find a way to overcome the problem. What is more iconic than that? They are like superheroes. And I think, I can't remember who this was, but I saw someone on social media within the last year or two who referred to the Scooby Gang as superheroes. And I was like, you know what? That is so valid. because we're so used to that idea of a superhero as like some kind of supernatural powers and you can fly and you can do all these things. But my goodness, the Scooby Gang are like real world, normal people who are superheroes because they are out saving the day. They are getting nothing in return for what they're doing. They're doing it out of the goodness of their heart. It is their deeds. It's not their works. It is deeds. They are doing it because it's the right thing to do and they want to help people. They don't need a reward. They don't need a pat on the back. They are stopping whatever they are doing to help other people. What? Tell me, someone fight me on this. What is more iconic than that kind of a role model? You can't find one for me. And it's unfortunate that we are in a time where that is very frowned upon, though, where, television stations are like, we're too family friendly. We're going to rebrand. Ugh, that makes me want to gag. We need that kind of hope. We need that kind of stability. We need that kind of optimism in life because life sucks. And life is really, really hard. And Scooby showed kids and adults that it is worth persevering through your problems to come out on the other side. And we knew that Scooby would do that. Scooby was always going to triumph because Scooby was good. He represented the good. We need more of that. That is, to me, that is the number one reason why, in spite of how modern iterations have tried to like monkey around with this and like take it out of the equation a little bit, it was so ingrained in the beginning, you can't get rid of it now. And that is what makes Scooby iconic for me. You can't take that away from him because that is what he is. That is not just like a characteristic of Scooby and the gang. That is what and who they are. And no one can take that away from them. They have been around too long and it is too important to the world. Not to be dramatic about it, but honestly, we need more of that mindset that Scooby brings. And I think everyone could feel a little bit better in their day-to-day life. Treat other people the way that you want to be treated. Even in the face of hardship, even when people are treating you like dirt. Very small example, but Funland, the robots running wild. The kids go and tell Sarah and Mr. Jenkins, somebody's wrecking your place. And they don't believe them and they tell them to bugger off. And did they bugger off? Yeah, they buggered off right back to find the problem because they wanted to help and they knew something was wrong. Scooby's face, the gang's face, should be in the dictionary next to iconic for all of these reasons because they are the ultimate role models shown to us in a relatable way. Are we going to stop a bank robbery? Probably not. But are we going to run into people that are trying to take advantage of others? People that are being cruel to other people to get what they want? Yes, every single person walking this planet is going to meet those people in their life. And Scooby shows us ways of dealing with that is not violence, that is not lowering yourself to being a villain yourself in order to try and deal with that. Good, it is good versus evil, and people have got to wake up and realize that that is the core of everything. Good versus evil, and good needs to win. Scooby shows us that good always wins. That's why Scooby's iconic.
Joel, your thoughts on good always wins with Scooby?
Yeah, that definitely made it iconic. I do have a counterpoint. And it's more towards, what about like good versus evil? But what about when people get their comeuppance? Like, I'm thinking EC comics. Those are meant for kids.
Mm-hmm.
Written for kids. But then we had the comics code because parents read them and they're like flipping out. But in all those stories, evil happened, but then they got their comeuppance.
But isn't that good triumphing over evil?
Well, no one I wouldn't say anything good came out of it though.
Is it?
If
I
you
mean, comeuppance by definition is getting something that you deserve.
but
No?
if you kill your wife, you poison your wife, and then she comes back as a zombie and kills you. Where's the good really? Just other than her
Mhm.
revenge. It's built
A
on
more
like a
abstract
tragic.
good.
And then I'm just thinking back more to like those fables. Is it what are
Aesop's
the
fables.
Yeah, because nothing really good comes out of that. But Scooby-Doo's different, right?
Mm,
They're at doing good
yeah.
and they prevail. Yeah. I don't know where I'm going with this, but I can't really speak too much about like modern stuff either. But I think maybe if we take your point about modern, we go like look at Velma. No one in that shows, from what I saw, was doing any good, right?
Right.
And that show is never like it's gonna fall from our minds, I imagine. I hope it doesn't find like a fan base 20 years down the road saying this show was ahead of its time because it did break the rules of Scooby-Doo where good prevails, where good, where they're out to do good. Um, but I'd like my point, I guess, with me with DC is like I don't have anything against the darker thing, but as long as they get their comeuppance,
Mm.
like the movies where it just ends on like a bleak note, which we got a lot in the 70s, the anti-hero, that
Mhm.
was a big thing. Where the bad guy gets away with things. Yeah, I don't like that. I like to see, I think everything should end with their comeuppance. But I get your point too, like a Scooby-Doo, like you want to sit down, you want to forget your world problems. You don't want it. If you want the real thing, you'd turn on CNN or whatever. So I get what you're saying. I just want to add maybe with modern stuff, like I'm sure there's some good modern stuff. I just don't pay attention too much, but I generally want people to get their comeuppance. And Scooby-Doo, they generally do, like they get caught. We don't find the aftermath, and I don't want to know about the aftermath. I want to move on. I assume the authorities are taking care of it, of these grown adults being detained by teenagers.
I agree that Scooby is definitely one of those shows where good usually prevails. And I think that was my problem with Mystery Incorporated, was that because it was an overarching storyline, there were episodes that ended where they weren't prevailing. And it was a little far off from the formula of Scooby that it was harder for me to really get into. I think the series is good for what it is. I just feel like I wasn't necessarily the target audience of that because I do prefer original Scooby, early Scooby. But I also liked the idea of an overarching storyline. I think I might have done things a little bit different with it. But overall, Scooby is definitely good, always wins. And it is nice to have that because you do watch Scooby and you can just forget about the crazy stuff that's happening in reality. And you can focus on something that you know that the outcome of it is going to be positive. And the gang themselves are positive for the most part. You know, they're just a bunch of friends working together. And yeah, Scooby and the gang are definitely iconic. Yeah. Final thoughts on what makes the Scooby Gang iconic? Joel?
I think we covered a lot of stuff here, and there's probably more, and I'd be interested in reading anyone's points of view below in the comments. Um, I think we covered quite a bit. We could probably triple this if you want, Nikki.
I'm definitely interested to hear what other people have to say too. I really would like to know what, especially, longtime fans, do you agree with us? Do you have other things that you feel make it iconic? People who maybe just kind of like it, but they're not like super fans, what do you think makes it iconic? Because your opinion could be much different than ours we are, I guess, what you would call super fans. I don't know. Yeah. Wendy, your final thoughts?
I would just encourage people to keep watching the classic stuff. If you like the modern stuff, that's fine too, but like, watch it on streaming, buy the DVDs, keep it alive. Because I really don't think that later versions of Scooby, if they had been where he started, I do not think that he would have hit the level of iconic that he did. I do not think that he would still be around in another 50 years to talk about. I think that he would have fallen by the wayside like so many other decent cartoons have done over the years. I think that it had to be classic Scooby. It had to be Where Are You that kicked it all off, because it was so perfect that is the only reason that people can screw around with it now and not completely kill it, because it was a very strong start. And I really don't think that any other iteration of Scooby could have built iconic status on its back. Like if Mystery Incorporated was the first series, if Zombie Island was the first Scooby that we saw, entertaining, absolutely. Good TV, sure. Something that you could have like 15, 20 more series and dozens of films built on it and people still talking about it the way that they do. I personally don't think so. I don't think that it would have it wouldn't have stood the test of time. So even if you prefer the modern, I just hope that everyone can look at things logically enough to realize that you only got to be here because of what came before it. So don't be criticizing it, because what you like now would not exist without Scooby the way that they created him. So show him due respect, please.
That is very true. There are so many things that make Scooby iconic, and yeah, we've touched on a lot of it, and I feel like it's pretty much everything that is Scooby, that makes Scooby, the writers, the artists, everything kind of makes it iconic. It's just a great show. And, we like Scooby a little.
A little bit.
A little bit. Yeah. We're going to wrap things up. Before we do, let everyone know where they can find you on social media. Wendy?
On Instagram, I'm at Wendy Bridge, Twitter X, Wendy Loves Jesus, and my blog is wendylovesjesus.wordpress.com.
Joel?
You can find me on YouTube. Just type in Plants Scooby.
And you can find all my links on ScoobyAddicts.com. Let us know your thoughts, because we're really interested to know what you think makes Scooby-Doo iconic. And thank you for joining us for another Scooby Panel. Thank you for tuning in to another Scooby Panel. I'm Nikki Blake from ScoobyAddicts.com. If you like these panels, please subscribe to my channel for more great discussions. A huge shout out to our patrons: Julie Rosen, Ross from ScoobyFan.net, Tagus, Garrett Spencer, Paul the Scooby Dude, and Jesse. If you would like to support the Scooby Panel, please go to patreon.com/ScoobyAddicts. A very special thank you to artist, blogger, and Scooby collector Wendy Bridge and Joel from Planet Scooby. Scooby Panel is available in podcast form on most podcast platforms, or as a web series on YouTube. You can find Scooby Panel on Instagram, Facebook, and X as @ScoobyPanel. We are part of the Collector's Maze Network, where you can find all things geek. Scooby and Shaggy were voiced by Scott Innes. Check out Scott's website, onescottshop.com. Scooby Addicts artwork by Will Davenport. Scooby Panel logo by Garrett Spencer. Video editing by Nikki Blake. Please join us next time for another Scooby Panel.